Okay. Well, hey, again, my name is Ryan. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're pleased to present to you a presentation on Kroll CyberClarity360 Express, what it is and how it can help you. As you all know, cyber threats are continuing to be a major issue for all of us here. And we want to make sure that we take the right steps to figure out what the cybersecurity posture is the people we work with in terms of our third parties. And sometimes it's easier said than done. We completely understand it. So in this presentation, we're going to walk through how you can approach this. Sorry, if I can slides there. There we go. Why it's important to understand cyber risk in your legal vendors specifically, but really truly all your vendors. How Kroll CyberClarity360 Express can help you. How we can give you some advice, perspective, and understanding to make changes you need to make. And how one Fortune 500 company are using it to understand outside vendors. We're going to have a case study at the end. We'll really talk about these issues and help you figure out what's going on here. And I was just informed that the slides aren't advancing. There we go. All right. So with that, I'd like to make sure we take a moment to think about why is third-party cyber risk important and hard to do. One of the big challenges with trying to understand third-party cyber risk is that your own first-party risk is a challenge. Thinking about how other people secure and protect their environment is its own special challenge that in many cases are unique to the businesses that they have. One of the best things about the processes that we have to put in place is that we need to figure out how do we better support and maneuver the posture of who we work with. And if you'll just stand by, we're having a small technical difficulty here that I have to resolve. So what that resolved, the best thing that we can do here is really kind of walk through what's the next steps. So I think one of the things that we all want to talk about here is if you have more than 50 law firms, one of your law firms has already been breached. One of the biggest challenges that any organization has is thinking through the size and scale of their own third parties and who's out there and who's part of what they need to work with. This isn't us saying this. This is the ABA's legal tech report. They have built a understanding around the law firms who have done some analysis of it and discovered that if you have more than 50 law firms, one of them specifically has probably had some sort of breach and potentially hasn't even notified you of it. If you only have just a few, keep in mind that 26% of firms have experienced some sort of security breach and only 9% had to report to the authorities or to their clients. Now, we're not trying to hit legal vendors too hard here. We're trying to make sure that they understand the processes that they need to do to secure the data they have. And they're trying to do things in a manner that would make it so that they secure it to the same level you need to be secured. So with that in mind, why are they such a big target? Why are they being attacked? Well, attackers are looking for data, looking to understand the challenges in front of them. Legal vendors are a high-value target. They have many clients, right? They're a treasure trove of data, confidential, sensitive, M&A data. And again, it's not us saying this. It's the American Bar Association Cybersecurity Legal Task Force saying this. Many experts recognize that our third parties, specifically legal vendors, have tons of data and represent a very attractive target for attackers. If you think about it from your organization's point of view, the data that you share with a law firm is pretty much the most important data that you might want to have in your organization. If you think about that, confidential data, PII, or critical company data, your legal vendors are handling it and working with all of it. And so it's something that we want to make sure that when we have this kind of level of need for trust, we have the kind of data that we're giving them, well, we need to take the time to make sure that data is secured. So we at CyberClarity360 do a lot of assessments. As you can see, we've done nearly 1,000 security assessments, and we've asked over 150,000 questions in that process. A lot of what we do is really engaging with the law firms to better understand their cybersecurity posture. In that process, though, what we're discovering is that many of them have deficiencies in some very key areas. I think there's across the board some weaknesses, and there's some strengths too. Again, we're not trying to position legal as not being as secure as other sectors, as not being as focused as they need to be. But in truth, what we need to think about is the fact that the organizations all have weaknesses that can be exploited. And certain things like, say, for example, multi-factor have real issues, right? If someone is to use your password for your bank account, in most cases, they won't be able to get access to your funds because your bank requires you to have some sort of other factor, a token, a text message, something that proves that you are you by leveraging another factor than just a password. As we can see here, many organizations fail to have the right multi-factor controls in place within their firms, meaning their data is only accessible as the passwords that they use to secure the data. It's a real concern and something that we think organizations need to really spend some time thinking about how they give this information and what they do with it. Now, thinking about that, what would be the impact if that data was acted upon? What would be the impact by which the information was taken and utilized inappropriately? Well, if you have a hacker hit your law firms, potentially you may get extortion attempts, as we've seen with recent cases of Lady Gaga and others, where the law firm is attempting to extort on the law firm itself with information on their clients. There could be business interruption costs for your organization, reputational damage, information that you do not want it getting out there, perhaps on harassment issues, employment issues, and just in general, the fact that your organization has been impacted by a data breach or one of your partners has been impacted by a data breach can cause a real issue when you're engaged in sensitive negotiations on contract renewals or positioning yourself to expand your business. Ultimately, people talk about breaches, right? Breaches are happening every day. Every organization has to deal with it. It's something that we don't necessarily get the luxury of avoiding, but it's something that we can try to engage some efforts in reducing, because if people hear about it, they're going to be concerned, right? Is my data secure? Can I trust this company that I do business with? And again, once this customer confidence is lost, it's hard to retain. There's regulatory actions as well too. Many organizations are under different regimes to protect the data, such as New York State DFS, GDPR, California CCPA, and many others. There are significant penalties and fines if those things cause an issue for you. So one of the things that I always like to remind folks, though, is that the regulators are there to protect the people that they work with in terms of the citizenry, and they're not necessarily out to get you. But if you have an issue or a problem, they're going to be coming after you to ask questions. Were you doing the job you needed to do? And of course, the other half of the equation is opposing counsel, right? If you're sued for a data breach, they're going to go after you for as much as they can to try to figure out what happened and how, and who was involved in this process, who was trying to protect your data. And if it was your law firms and they failed to have the right security systems in place, you are just as liable for their mistakes. Now, the process of doing traditional assessment methods can be difficult, right? We engage in on a day-to-day. I'm not knocking the normal process of doing assessments, right? There's great benefits to it. You can define the scope. You can understand how they're implementing things. You can understand their cyber resilience, right? You can get a much better picture of their posture by asking questions and learning how do they align their systems? What have they done that makes them more secure? And having a frank and honest conversation. The problem is that it takes time. It needs a lot of internal buy-in to make sure that the right people will sign off on it and the right steps are being taken. And there's a process in which the vendors may not want to talk. The vendors may have some issues here. So we always want to try to find ways to engage them in a manner that is approachable and they can work with us. And of course, let's be honest here. Anything else that you engage with, whether it's a self-assessment, it's subject to some puffery, right? People like to put themselves in the best light possible. And it's difficult to do this at scale, right? There's challenges about engaging every vendor. There's challenges in having these conversations. There's challenges in collecting the data. If you ask 100 questions of every vendor and you've got 100 law firms that you're working with, that's 10,000 different data points. It's very difficult to scale that without automation. The truth of the matter is that these are important steps that everybody needs to take, but they need to be taken with an eye towards the right processes in place and having technology to support your efforts. Now, speaking of technology, I want to introduce my colleague Shay Colson here to kind of walk us through some of the ways that using our technology-enabled services, you can make a dent into your third-party cyber risk and really kind of figure out what we can do through Kroll CyberClarity360 Express to make an improvement there. Shay?
Great. Thanks, Ryan, and thanks for navigating some of those early choppy waters with the tech. I think when we're all on video conferences all day, we get pretty good at just giving each other a little bit of grace. So, but I do think that changing landscape is something I want to jump off from for the discussion. So when we look at what we've built here in the Express product, it's been designed to meet the real world in the sense that all of what Ryan talked about for the traditional kind of engagement questionnaire assessment methods, those are all great. Those are the best practice. Those are the ways to get the richest amount of data. But it takes an incredible amount of effort and resources to deploy those, particularly as Ryan mentioned, at any scale. And so What we've decided to do with the Express product is take a little bit of a different approach that is complementary and is really designed to help you get a sense of where to focus these efforts, not that you need to deploy them all together at once. So Ryan, if you can go ahead and advance the slide. I haven't seen it change here on my side. Give it one more second here.
Is that better?
Okay. Nope. But we can
All right.
carry on it.
We're gonna
I
look through
jinxed us by mentioning the tech issues again, right? So,
Yeah.
so I wanna just lay out a little bit of the landscape of what the Express product does, and then we're gonna walk through what it looks like when the results are back. But there's a couple of design principles. So one of the things that's important to consider as we look at cyber risk across our vendor landscape is the entire portfolio of vendors. So rather than having to limit the amount of effort initially, we are designing this product to give you the entire landscape at once. And as the slides catch up, we will get there. Perfect. Thank you, Ryan. So the goal here is to let you see the entire landscape together, but also not require you to engage with the same level of effort as the traditional assessment method. So we've designed it to be zero touch, both from your perspective as the corporate client and for the vendors and for the legal services providers. So it's very rapid, and it's also something that we can perform continuously. To Ryan's point, it is technology enabled. And so we have designed the approach to gather the technology, analyze it from a data perspective, wait it out, but then produce what we like to think of as a little bit more human readable results. So really trying to make meaning of some of these very technical elements. But I want to highlight a little bit of what we look at when we perform this analysis and why. And what we've decided to do is focus on three kind of key areas. One in digital footprint, which we'll walk through each of these here in a minute. The next in security metrics, and the third in at-risk digital identities. And we've decided to do these very specifically. And what we've done is looked at the data relative to what actually causes breaches. Verizon publishes a data breach investigations report on an annual basis, and their May report indicated that the most prevalent sources of data breaches are the ones that we're examining. When we look at data from the Ponemon Institute, they're saying the same thing. It is misconfigurations, it is lack of patching, it is usernames and passwords being breached from one site and reused on another. And so those are the things we're focusing on. It also helps us to take this external perspective and look at someone the way an attacker would look at that person. Go around and see what's available to them, what they can leverage, and what is essentially low-hanging fruit. But we have some other benefits as well. Because we are standard in our methodology, we can compare apples to apples. So we have this comparison capability. And to the final point on the right, it's discrete, it's passive. It requires no participation from either your side or from the vendor side. And that gives us a sense of velocity so that we can really figure out where the risks might be and how to address them. So let's dig into each of these three elements, starting with the digital footprint. And again, we have worked very hard to leverage the technical components, the data behind these things, but manifest them in a way that a non-cyber expert can understand. So in this case, the digital footprint, it's kind of like the property lines or the survey of a firm's digital address. So we're looking at things that your IT team or your InfoSec team might call the attack surface, but it's things like, what are the domains that this firm uses? You might know their main one. Do they have others? What goes on those other domains? Who's hosting those domains? Where are they hosting those domains? Just to give us a sense of that broad set of exposure, where the lines are and what's in the boundaries. Once we've defined those, we then dig a little bit deeper and look at the security metrics for everything that's underneath that footprint. I actually really like this slide because this would be the house that's described on the listing as cute 1920s bungalow that needs a little TLC. And then you go and see the house, and this is what you see. We're doing essentially the same thing when we look at these components of the digital footprint. We're going to go and evaluate, are your patches up to date? Do you have known vulnerabilities that are exposed to the internet? Do you have other material weaknesses that attackers could leverage? And by doing so, we can give you a sense of what that scaled level of exposure is. And then the third element that we bring into scale is around at-risk digital identities. And Ryan, can you throw the presentation back up?
Yeah, we're just having those technical difficulties again.
Okay. So I think the at-risk digital identities is really one of those areas where it is both the most difficult to understand and also sometimes the most visceral. We have seen in the news in the last few weeks reports of millions and millions of credentials being leaked from popular sites in financial services, in home decor of all places, and other places. And the reality is, and maybe some people on this call are guilty of this too, you might reuse a password every now and then because you've already got it memorized. It's easy to just type it in when you sign up for the service. And the challenge is when that happens and you are compromised in one breach and you happen to have reused that password somewhere else, like perhaps your corporate account, and you don't have the multi-factor authentication deployed, like Ryan said, then we have a significant opportunity for malicious actors to come in and take advantage of that. And so by understanding not just what the kind of overall volume of identity loss or leakage looks like, but what it looks like over time, you can understand where those threats are focused and help ensure that your legal vendors are prepared to defend against them. Have they put in the proper protocols and policies and safeguards? And if not, and you can help them understand the risk, it might be a great way to spur action. So let me go to the next slide here, and we'll just give you a sense of, on our average firm, we ran the report yesterday from to Ryan's point, the thousands of data sets that we've got. This is what an average firm looks like from this perspective. So an average firm has 40 web servers, has 15 DNS servers, has 5 email servers. And the problem with this is not that they have these, but that they have to secure them, right? That they have this footprint where we hope that all of those things are being managed appropriately. We can also provide those details about the management capability or the deployment of them. The other piece on the identity element, you'll notice the big blue bar in the middle, and that represents the past 31 through 60 days, so last month, essentially. And you can see that last month, the average firm had 357 identities exposed. And this means it's usernames or passwords or both, or a hashed password or some other identity element. And you can see, right, it's obvious that that's a tremendous uptick. So the month before was low at 29. This past month has been even lower at 20. Something happened last month in the legal industry where we had over 10-fold increase in identity exposure. Now, what was that and how did it impact your firms? That's what the portfolio report is designed to highlight. So I'm gonna turn it back over to Ryan. He's gonna walk you through the deliverable to help understand what this individual snapshot of data of an average firm looks like when you take a look at your whole portfolio, and then how we bring that to life to help give you a sense of where your risk lies, how you can better interpret your exposure to that risk, and then drive forward to a little more targeted and more tailored engagement with your vendors to really manage this risk and drive it down rather than just be subject to whatever the bad guys want to do that week. So go ahead, Ryan. Sorry for all the technical difficulties. I see you working hard.
No, it's all right. It's technology, right? In this day and age, it's a fun thing. But for everybody on, as Shay just walked us through the technical aspects of this, it really comes back down to this report, right? So when you work with us, what we do is we run all those tools that Shay just walked through. We leverage that data, and then we produce this report. And the intent of this report is, as Shay said, is to give you a sense of where you need to go next, right? To help you figure out where your trouble spots are, to help you figure out what are your real concerns, what is out there, right? If you think about the map, you're moving away the fog of war and getting to a level of knowledge that you didn't have beforehand. And we've kind of organized this into 2 key areas, right? We've got our executive summary section, which really walks through, where are your red zones, your yellows, and your greens? What are your low, moderate, high risk legal vendors, right? We're taking a look at how they're structured, how they're looking from the external side, as Shay just walked through, and giving you a sense of, hey, based on what we see, we would categorize these folks in those areas. You'll notice, though, that we also have an opportunity to do the x-axis, right? So our y-axis is dependent upon our data. Our x-axis, in many ways, is dependent upon the data we work with you on. We'll talk about that need a little later in the case study. But with those 2 metrics together, we can help you really reorganize your cyber risk prioritization with more data to help you make better decisions on who you need to interact with and how. And even including the recommendations on how to move forward, right? We give you directions in terms of what you should do short-term, mid-term, and long-term. In many cases, you're going to focus more closely on your high-risk vendors, obviously, but how you interact with them, what your processes are, it's going to be heavily informed by the work we do with you. Now, if there are questions about each individual firm, we can actually give you a breakdown of where they sit within their different categories, so we can break it out. And we'll go further down into the areas of what we can do, what you should be doing with your high-risk firms as well, too, trying to help you figure out, okay, what's your step 1, step 2, step 3? Because no process is complete in and of itself. Security is a journey, it's not a destination, and there's multiple steps to improve where you're at. And if there's any specific questions, we actually include what we call definitely our baseball card, right? How is their posture? How many breach credentials have they had? What is the next steps in terms of, where they're looking at and how they can get better. Sorry, folks, just having some technical difficulties. But the goal of all of this is that we really want to make it so that you guys can have a better understanding of what each of your firms are doing for you. And the key thing here about the service is it's really available to anybody, any level of maturity. One of the things that we think is great is that there are many of you who are on the call who have robust cybersecurity programs. This can be a great augmentation of those robust those programs to help you better understand and take the steps you need to say, okay, are we doing a good job? How can we improve? Where can we do better? And the other half of this aspect is that we want to help you validate, right? So if you're not at that program where you have a vast apparatus behind you, you can start thinking about this from the point of view of, okay, how do I improve and validate what I'm working on? How do I get myself a better sense of who I'm connected to? And then, of course, if you're not in either one of those camps, prioritization assessment's key, right? Who is out there that's working with you, and what is their cyber risk exposure? How can we start figuring out our path on that security journey and making the right moves based on the right data? And we can help you with that. So again, we're here at any point of maturity, and that's probably one of the things that makes us a little different than other services right there. If you think about the cyber risk rating services, they're kind of delivering a lot of information, which sometimes takes time to think through. But one of the great things about our service is that we can help you kind of make sense of this as it relates to your organization and make sense of it as it relates to where you are in your security journey. A good case study I can walk us through is the work we did for a Fortune 500 technology company. They were thinking through, they had about 120 law firms, and they're trying to figure out, really how much cyber risk exposure exists in their portfolio. They'd had required outside counsel guidelines, and they had different contracts everybody agreed to, but they hadn't done a really good job of assessing and auditing that, right? They did have a third-party cyber risk program in place, but it wasn't very, very mature, surprisingly so. So one of the things that they said is, let's try to work on this and try to get a sense of where we need to start really spending some time and effort, because we know that our legal vendors represent a significant risk that we've not paid enough attention to. So they worked with us, and we managed to put together a pretty good report in 3 weeks for helping them understand where their struggles are, where their challenges are, and how they can improve. That outcome led to those 3 risk tiers that you saw. And that gives them a chance to focus their resources. We all have scarce resources in this day and age. But with that, they were able to put together a listing of, okay, for our 40 high-risk firms, we're going to really deep dive into these matters and spend some time with them and to better understand it. But what was really neat about this conversation is, while we didn't go too deep into their prioritization with their law firms, we did discuss how many open matters they had. And that allowed us to create that really neat x-axis to say, hey, listen, you've got a lot of work going to this entity that actually has a lot of cyber risk challenges. Even more so, we had a few entities that weren't getting a lot of risk, but that actually had a really low, had a lot of open matters, but actually had a really good low cyber risk score. So as they're entering negotiations and having conversation about who should get more work with their organization, they're able to have a more full conversation saying, hey, these entities represent lower cyber risk for us. Perhaps we should have more open matters with them versus those that had a lot of open matters and were at high risk. It gave another piece of ammunition to their negotiations to say, we really want you to improve this, or we'll have to change our allocation of our needs and services with you. So ultimately, by working with us, we were able to deliver a report that let them break their vendors into 3 tiers and then provide them the opportunity to really deep dive it in a matter that made sense from them from their business's point of view. So how can you work with us, right? First thing you got to figure out is the scope, which vendors we're working with and how often you want this report to be issued. And then really we just need your list of vendors. You give us the list of vendors in about 3 weeks, and we can deliver that full portfolio analysis. The key thing for us is just understanding who you're working with, and ideally some method of prioritization to give us that x-axis. Now, for 2020, because this is a new product, we did want to introduce this discounted rate. for as low as $250 per vendor, which is a pretty significant discount off of our normal prices. And considering the level of depth that we're going to be offering to you, represents a tremendous value. But again, we recognize that these are tough times for everybody, and we really want to find a way to let folks begin their security journey or provide another check on their existing processes. And of course, you know Kroll, you know who we are at Duff & Phelps. I think it goes without saying. So at this point, I do want to remind folks that other than asking questions about how bad Ryan is at managing a PowerPoint in a webinar, the box is open for any questions you might have about what we are, what we're doing. And of course, we can always do separate questions and follow-ups individually to share more information. Shay, I see we actually got one question in already, sent directly, which is surprising. I think this is one more for you, though. Can I get started with just one or two firms?
Yeah, well, first of all, again, thanks for battling through the tech issues. So I think that's a really good common question. And I think a lot of folks are trying to understand, well, how do I try it? Can I pilot it? And the honest answer here is that this product is designed for a portfolio analysis. What you're going to get is designed to cover the whole landscape. So just looking at one part is not going to serve you for this product. Certainly we have other products that can do individual single entity analysis, and we're happy to provide information on that. But this is really designed for that portfolio perspective. And I think it's important to understand that it's there to serve as, to Ryan's point, either the jumping off point where you can do this and then tailor resources, or to augment and supplement work that's already going on in your portfolio as an additional source of validation. But in both cases, it's designed to be priced right, to be low effort for you and low friction for your vendors, and to be delivered in a way that is tangible and can be used to make better risk-based decisions. So it's really not designed for one or two. We can certainly talk to you about how to support those individual efforts, but this is for you to get that big picture and then dive deeper and drive risk management from those decisions. Good question, though.
Yeah, that was a very good question. We actually got another very good question, which is, can you speak to the impact that you can assess with regards to COVID? I'm assuming it's meaning, how do we get this done even within the COVID environment? And Shay, I think it's, again, right up your alley.
Yeah, sure. So there's really two sides to that coin. One is on the side of all of our vendors, right, including here at Duff & Phelps. Everybody is looking to find a path forward in this new reality, and it feels like we are still living with some of the early decisions we made in March as we were all trying to grapple with the change that was happening in the world. And so, this has security implications. If you have folks who were in the office every day and who were designed to leverage security controls that were deployed at that network, corporate network layer, and the next day everybody's working from home, that's going to present challenges. When you have law firms, and we have actually heard these stories, who are buying laptops at Best Buy or at Costco to ship to their employees' houses because they don't have enough in the stock room, are those going to be configured the right way? Are those going to go to the same level of standard that the ones that came from corporate InfoSec went out the door with? Probably not. And so from a COVID perspective, as unfortunate as it is to layer on this kind of extra challenge, most enterprises are struggling to play catch up to work well in the distributed world. And on the flip side, that happens for these security teams as well, right? So those of us who are spending our days trying to get a sense of this landscape and help our business units or our internal stakeholders and our leadership make better decisions, we also have our own challenges in terms of resources, tooling, and availability. So we've really, again, taken a very pragmatic approach to say, this report, this tool, this service is designed to jumpstart your efforts, make you more efficient, and help you have reasons for doing what you're doing and why you're doing it. And so I think really, to the best of our ability, we've tailored this to the solution for the problem that we have today in the world that we're in, and are going to continue to update that, and being an early partner and an early customer of ours and giving us that feedback and using the solution will help us move that forward as well. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point about this. The nature of the world today is more challenging, and it's difficult to engage in the way that perhaps we thought we would previously. So new methods are critical to really get to the heart of what's going on here. Another question that came in, and I can handle it, which is, how do you do updates? So I think, as I alluded to previously, with the scoping of the engagement, we just need to know how often, right? Ideally, you want to do this on a quarterly basis, even more frequently if you can, to really get an understanding of the cyber risk exposure, because it changes from day to day. As Shay pointed out, there was a big spike in 1 month. If you were running the report in March, you would have missed it. But in April and May, you would see this large spike. So I think there's a real value in trying to do that. And of course, from a perspective of engagement, it's going to be per report will be lower cost overall, right? Because we're going to be doing more of those, and it just makes more sense. Another housekeeping question that came in is, can this get loaded up into my matter management system? And yes, we absolutely can work with you to figure out how to get this into whatever matter management system you're using. For, again, that example of negotiations and tracking your outside counsel firms, we can be very helpful in that process. And in terms of getting that data in there, we're happy to work with you. And again, we can have a conversation offline to discuss this further. I don't see any other questions here. Shay, anything you want to share before we wrap this up?
No, only that even in the way we've approached the webinar, we don't need to fill the hour. We've covered what we want to, so I think we're happy to give you the time back. But the pragmatic approach to making incrementally better decisions, we all would love to be perfect. That's not the reality. We're just trying to be better, and that's how we've built this product. And we're going to continue to build it, and would love to do it with you and have your help to make it more tangible and more beneficial to you as you put it to use in your own kind of contextual risk journeys.
Yeah, I have to agree. And thank you all for joining. Again, apologies for the audio-visual issues here. It truly is a new world with all these challenges technology-wise, although hopefully we've learned a few lessons in terms of the setup here, so it won't happen again. But again, thank you all for joining. I really appreciate you guys taking some time to listen to this, and we're happy to answer any questions privately, separately, about how this can work and what we can do to help you. Again, thanks so much.